Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 145 of Peak of Serenity podcast. I am, as always, one of your hosts, emallson, and joining me, we have my co-host, Anomoly.
Hello.
And this week, patch 10.0.5 came out. We have a lot to talk about from that, and also
Yes.
10.0.7. We got some announcements about, which we knew that they were having a fairly aggressive release schedule, but it's still very new to us to have patch just came out
Another one on the docket.
and just another one goes up on, it's not up on PTR yet, I think, but it's up on the dev channels. Like we can see there's a new build listed for them.
Yep.
And actually I believe there's two new builds, one for 10.0.7 and one for 10.1.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they are it's crazy because I think this I don't remember a time where you just had patch after patch after patch, which is just nuts. So
probably the closest to that was actual vanilla WoW.
that's true.
Where like they got up to like 1.14 or something with minor
Yeah.
patches. There's 1.14.1 and stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
there's I'm trying to, was 1.14 actual vanilla or was that the classic patch for, I don't remember.
Yeah, I think
Either way,
1.14 was the classic, yeah. But they got up there in terms of
yeah,
that. And they
that would have made
bunch of
1.13 the last real vanilla patch, but it's still that's a lot.
yeah. Yeah, there's sub patches in there too. So which weren't as big as the dot releases. So yeah. Yeah, it's crazy that I mean they've got their marks that they're marching towards, which is cool. So hopefully they hit it. Hopefully this doesn't turn into like a WOD situation where stuff just gets cut for the sake of meeting the schedule. But it seems like they have a roadmap set up. They know what they're working towards,
Yeah,
and it seems like they can hit it, right? It's the standard stuff we've always expected in patches, plus seems like not minor but smaller things sprinkled in, like the trading post that starts February 1st, right?
right.
And then I know the big and '07 is like a couple of class things, but also it's the new story stuff for the evoker zone, right?
Yep.
That everybody gets to experience. So it seems like smaller patches have a right size content wise that they shouldn't miss it. With
Yeah.
the big patches are still raid plus zone, which has been like the standard formula for years now. So
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah.
yeah,
That's cool.
exciting.
But
Exciting.
also progression this week. Sounds like you guys had a really good week on
Do we?
Dathea.
Oh, so I don't there are not many times where I look at my guild, and this isn't derogatory towards anybody in my guild, or it's not supposed to be me, where I'm like, we played out of our minds. Like there are certain maybe one or two pulls in a night where damn, we did really well, but Dathea, we absolutely crushed. So we killed Dathea in 21 pulls. The funny thing is if you subtract 4 of those pulls, so we pulled her Tuesday night just to sort of set up weak auras, and
Yeah.
we literally didn't go to platforms. It was we spent 4 polls just
Yeah.
doing weak auras, seeing how marks worked. You subtract those 4 polls from those 21, and it's what? That's 17 polls, real polls we put into her, and we killed her.
Yeah.
Um, which is absolutely crazy because it literally our chart is anywhere between 60 and 50% wipes and then a kill. Nothing below maybe I think our lowest attempt pre that kill was 45, 46%.
Yeah.
But we dude, yeah, I think you're pulling up. We absolutely crushed it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was awesome in terms of we got through it really quickly. It was not awesome in the terms of we had nothing prepared for Diurna.
Yeah.
like,
We yeah. So like last weekend, Dathea did end up being again like a 3 hour affair to finish off.
yeah,
So we got through Dathea. We didn't end up actually. It took us most of the raid night, I think, to get Dathea down. So we did not actually pull Diurna last week.
mhm,
But we did decide to extend, partially because Dathea did take as long as it did.
yeah,
Um, so we actually like. So you guys took, based on this, you took about 1.5 hours to progress Dathea.
yeah,
We took like 6, right?
yeah,
And a lot of that
yeah,
was last Sunday. So we then came into Diurna on Friday. We sunk, like 4 hours.
yeah,
And we were pretty prepared. I think we reached Diurna quickly enough that I think there's still a big gap in some of the like um really underpinnings of how some of the mechanics function, like the great staff. There's some things that
Yeah.
people really understand that are well known in the community, like the fact that you can um basically make the great staff mechanic, like the mythic mechanic for the great staff is that she periodically casts this stormfisher thing that causes puddles to spawn everywhere you've like taken the laser from the great staff. It has limited memory, so you can do extra early on. They don't need to break eggs or anything. You just take the laser and you run it into a wall. You do
Right.
extra early on, and then when you reach the middle of the room at the end of your route, the lasers don't do anything with Stormfisher.
Yeah.
So, like, that's something that's relatively well known. One thing that I actually struggle with, so I'm tanking the boss on Diurna, and um, like, I was doing this thing where you try and get the great staff to get planted in the center of the 3 eggs that you're trying to break so that everybody has an easy time breaking their egg. And like 95% of the time it was great, and then like 5% of the time it would spawn on the opposite side of the boss, which is not something I had seen anybody talk about.
Yeah.
I posted about it. There's this Ridley Discord. I posted about it in there, and they're like, "Yeah, we have no idea what you're talking about." Like, nobody apparently has encountered this. I don't know if nobody else was trying to do the thing that I was trying to do,
Right. Yeah.
which is trying to get the great staff, not the boss, but the great staff dead center. Um, and it turns out I did some investigating after raid. It turns out that the boss casts basically at the start of the great staff cast, there's a hidden cast that happens that snapshots not the tank's position, which is what I thought was being snapshot. I thought it was snapshotting me based on my experience in hero.
Right.
It actually snapshots the boss's facing.
Ah, okay. Okay.
And it does that at the very beginning of the cast, but visually, the boss will like turn to face the tank and then start the cast for the great staff. That's not actually how it always works, though. Sometimes she starts to cast the great staff and then turns to face the tank. So if she snapshots her facing while she's still facing away from the tank from having done rapid incubation,
Right.
then you get the great staff on the wrong side, and the boss has a really big hitbox, so that the difference there is like 10 yards
Right.
from where like I'm standing as the tank and where she turned to cast rapid incubation. And the solution is to not overthink it and just like get the boss to the center instead. Don't try
That's
and put
fair.
the great staff in the center. There's like a slightly harder thing that I'm gonna do. I think that is like I spent some time doing some geometry as well, because there's one set in particular we were having trouble with. Basically, the ideal scenario for controlling the position of the great staff is the tank is in a position where that's just where she's going to face when she casts rapid incubation. That makes it perfectly consistent because it doesn't matter whether she turns to face the tank in between casting rapid incubation and starting the great staff cast, because that's just where the tank is anyway.
Right.
So that's probably what I'm going to try and do, and I know how I do that on like 10 of the 11 egg sets that we do. And that 11th one, I probably just plant the boss in the middle and hope for the best.
Yeah.
And like just rely on it being in the middle means that it can't be so far off that it wipes us, basically.
Gotcha. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I mean we so like number one, we weren't really prepared to do Diurna, so there was a lot of just like even on like so I would primarily focus on like the healing side of things, and so healing wise, we didn't have really cooldown set up, so we
Yeah.
wiped to just not having a cooldown where we needed it.
Yeah.
And the second thing too is like because we killed it so quickly, like our tanks, we just did our typical heroic strat, which has our blood decay on ads and our warrior on the boss. So like
Yeah.
there's a little bit of a hairy situation in certain cases where like our warrior just fell over to like
The
the
healing
sum of the
reduction
damage.
plus the
Yeah.
damage. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't like there are times like we got to 25% of the boss, right? We reached phase 2 a few
Oh, nice.
times. We were close. I think actually if been trying to be too clever with the great stuff, we might have just killed it on Friday because we probably lost 6 or 7 pulls just to that.
Uh-huh.
But there's one point in the fight around egg set 9 that so much damage goes out that, like, I have the healing reduction. I'm playing Blood Decam. I have the 50% healing reduction. I hit Death Strike and it full heals me.
Yeah.
Through the 50% healing reduction.
Jesus. That's crazy. That's just wild. That's wild.
And AMS, of course, is like super good for it because the egg breaks are magic damage. So you can't AMS anything like super crazy powerful in phase 1, but you can just like hit AMS during the raid damage that goes out and be safe.
Yeah.
You do it on every other set, so you like figure out which sets you're scared of and you push it. You live.
That's crazy. Yeah. Yeah. So that was definitely an interesting experience in terms of like, yeah, who's about from our tank healing perspective. And even, I mean, to be fair, the funny thing is too, like, even on the ads, like there are certain ad sets where like our blood TK just gets crushed, where it's like literally 100 to 0. And like we have like no idea, like just not an idea. We know what's happening, but it's just like it's very scary. And typically that happens when we're moving, which makes it even scarier. Like moving from one set to the other. So
we have our tank comp is Vengeance, Demon Hunter, and Blood DK. And I'm not gonna lie, I have no idea how my co-tank lives those ads sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially like there are times that he'll get clipped by the tremor things, which by the way,
I hate the visual.
The visual for the tremors is huge bait. It's a lie. They do the cone, and like if you're in melee, you step out of the cone, right, and you think you're safe, and then the like zigzaggy rock things come out of them, and they leave the area of the cone, and they just like hit you.
Yeah.
When that cone happens, if you're staying in melee, you gotta like really, really move.
Yeah.
Because they leave the area of the cone, and it's so tilting.
Yeah, that, and like the other thing too is the fact that like there's I don't know if you've noticed that. Well, I don't know if you don't do ads, but like the different sides of the rooms have different brightnesses. So like where the ads start, it's darker in that corner, and so the AOE, like the graphic line, like is more masked because it's just generally darker. So the colors are more similar than like the opposite side of the room that you like sort of move around to. It's a little bit lighter over there, so like it's slightly easier to see. Yeah. So like, and maybe that's just me, like, because I have bad eyes and I'm old, but like to me, that was always like the first set's always the most difficult. The rest of them are, I mean, they're definitely hard to like make sure you keep like a line of, but or be aware of. But yeah, that first set is just real bad. And the other thing too is like the storm cloud lines that come out from the ad, like around the ads, are like because like there's initial damage when they come out, and then they're dormant, and then there's another set of damage when they disappear. And so like there are many times where like we lost people just to being like, okay, I can just run over this, and they're like, oh yeah, I didn't take damage last time. I'll run over like the line as like they're ending and their damage hits again. It's just like
the Stormfishers actually do ticking damage the whole time they're up.
Yeah, but you can run through and not die. Yeah, like taking one tick is fine. You dip low, but you're not going to die. The problem is if you're standing there when it initially hits, and then when it ends, it's like a big burst of damage, like 200 or something K.
So it's also like actually super dangerous to take the hits because of egg breaks and other raid damage going out.
Yeah. Yeah, that fight's just super bursty.
Yeah, we had multiple times that people died. It was like, oh, you took a tick of Stormfisher and an egg break happened. Like, fell over.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do. But
another fun thing, Dream Breath. You take damage from Stormfisher. Sometimes multiple ticks from Stormfisher when you cast.
Dream Breath. Really?
When you cast Dream Breath, if your Dream Breath goes over it, so like we have adjusted our Dream Breath timing so that he's no longer casting it during Stormfisher.
That's good. Yeah, I don't think we use them over that set of ads that I'm thinking about. And like if you're looking at it's like the first set on the left side as you like if you're looking at the room where you walk in, that like front left corner set of ads is where the Stormfishers are really bad for us. And I don't think he's casting it there. But yeah, it's an interesting progression. We're definitely not as far as you guys. I don't think we've seen phase 2 yet. We've gotten to like the 10th or 11th egg break. We're actually doing 12, I think, egg breaks.
12 is so With the
12
tank,
is
that's actually one of the things for this week. One of the hot fixes, they nerfed the phase 2 tank soak on
Mhm.
Diurna on Mythic. So for those that aren't familiar, her Mortal Stone Claws mechanic that she does in phase 1 changes in phase 2 on Mythic only, and it
Mhm.
gains a tank soak. So it's a 90% healing reduction. There's a lot.
Yeah.
And then it was doing like 1.1 million damage divided among everybody that soaked it. There's a catch. Blood DK could AMS and just prevent the application of the soak. It didn't have the
Yeah.
like Pierce's immunities flag. So the actual strat that everybody did is you soaked every other one with your blood DK. You effectively had to have a blood DK to eliminate half of the damage in the
Yeah.
final phase. Not literally have to, like, not literally half the damage that goes out, but a lot of the damage that goes out, a lot of the unavoidable damage that goes out comes from that. And then the other tank would either solo it with externals. Something like time dilation is extremely good for that because, just 70% damage reduction. And then you have to heal them through the dot, but it's whatever. 70% damage reduction.
Yeah.
Or you would soak it with like rogues, immunes, that kind of thing. They just nerfed it. It went from 1.1 million damage to like 480k.
Yeah.
Cut it more than in half. And
Crazy reduction.
basically, what that means is like if your tank is healthy after taking the initial hit, you just like have your two tanks soak it together.
Yeah.
And what we are actually probably going to do in practice once we clean up our transition into phase 2 a little bit more is have tanks plus a rogue, and the rogue just pushes faint, which is like a 40% AoE damage reduction.
It's like crazy.
Something ridiculous. I think
Yeah.
it's like rogue pushes faint. Maybe we have a DPS DK. Maybe they go in there and they hit AMS, which is also like a really good value for them because it generates a bunch of runic power for them.
Yeah.
And also they should take literally 0 damage. I did the math. If we have a rogue, a DPS DK, myself, and my co-tank tanking or soaking that soak, the
Yeah.
DPS DK's AMS gets like 98% consumed, and they take 0 damage.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. Yeah. We'll have to, I think we have to we still have to lay all that out, but our goal was to try and hit phase 2. We just didn't hit it on Thursday.
Yeah,
And I mean, we luckily, we didn't really talk about this, but like we were delayed to start raid on Tuesday because even though I
yeah.
think the servers came up at 7,
People couldn't
like
log in.
people couldn't log in until like we finally got a raid all online at 9 Eastern. And so in like those 3 hours, luckily we cleared everything to Dathea and then, killed Dathea in the first hour on Thursday and then
Yeah,
went to Diurna. So yeah, it was a good raid week. Even with the patch and like a lot of the issues on patch day, we had a really good raid week, which was awesome.
yeah. Actually, speaking of issues on patch day, that's been way more of an issue this expansion, I think, than in previous expansions.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just because like in Shadowlands, we had 8 total patch days, right? We had
Yeah.
9.0.5, 9.1. Math is hard. No, we had like 8 total because there was like
Yeah.
9.2.7 as well as
Yeah.
9.2 and 9. And of those, the like ones that I remember actually being bad were like the Sepulchre release day, which
Yep.
didn't have a raid release, right? Because it's just a
Yeah.
patch release, it's staggered. And then the season 4 release, which did
Yep.
have raids, and it was a shit show.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
But these, like, we have patch releases in the middle of, raid times. And so, like, the midweek team in our guild that is normally Tuesday, Wednesday raid times, they heard 10.0.5 is releasing on Tuesday, and also, by the way, 8-hour maintenance. And they went, who can raid on Thursday?
Yeah. Immediately swapped. Yeah.
So they are now they did Wednesday, Thursday this week, and actually so many people from their team can do Thursday. I think literally everybody from their team can do Thursday, especially with like more advanced notice than what they had
Yeah.
for 10.5. I think they're doing Wednesday, Thursday for the rest of the tier, and then revisiting the situation because uh they
Tuesdays are bad.
yeah, they lost, like they would have lost a couple of hours on Tuesday from like for important people like healers not being able
Yeah.
to log in. And uh they've lost other times, like just lost an entire raid night. The when the like group disband stuff was really bad, it was on
Yeah.
Tuesdays. Like if
Yeah,
they
we
had
got
raided Thursday, they would have been fine.
yeah, it's funny too, you talk about that. We got a little bit of that on I think that was on Wednesday when doing heroic. We did like a random heroic on Wednesday. Or maybe it was main raid. I forget. One of the 2 days, either Tuesday or Wednesday, we got the whole disconnect thing again this week, which was
Oh, that's
something
fun.
we hadn't seen on Mal'Ganis, but like, yeah, like literally like half our raid like went offline. Like this is great.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, it was a good raid week. I mean the fights have like I'll tell you like Dathea didn't do Dathea, but Diurna is fun so far.
Yeah.
Um, I'm in the ad group, so I get to like run around and
I will
um
say I got extremely frustrated with the great staff positioning thing because like just
yeah,
literally randomly wiping because the
yeah,
boss decided to start the cast before she faced you instead of after she faced you. Which I didn't know was what was happening at the time. I thought it was snapshotting me, and I was trying to figure out like what I was doing wrong. And
yeah,
it turns out that I had screwed up like 10 seconds prior, and I needed to just have the boss in a different position so that it wouldn't wipe us even if it went in a bad spot.
yeah.
But yeah, I got really frustrated by that. But other than that, like the boss has been fun.
Yeah, I will say we were both wrong in that we both said Diurna wouldn't receive any nerfs before other bosses, and she was
I this
100%
is
nerfed.
this is a nerf that is only a nerf if you're not doing what a lot of guilds were starting to do, which was running 2 blood DK.
Yeah,
It is something that we discussed a little bit, was having our DPS DK go blood and doing double blood on the fight,
yeah,
because then you just don't get any tank soaks in phase 2.
yeah. Basically negates the mechanic. Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
I understand why they did it. It basically removes the comp check from this boss. You can do it with any
exactly.
tank comp now, fairly easily. Or at least the tank soak in phase 2 is not going to be a big deal. Like honestly, if you really don't want to think about it at all, you can literally just drop it on melee. It's a huge soak. You could just like go stand on the melee group,
Yeah,
and splitting it between like 8 people makes it like a 50k hit, and that's just like not a big deal.
yeah. No, that's true. That's true. That's true. But yeah, I thought that was. I think I pinged you like as
Yeah,
soon as it came out. It's
yeah,
like we were wrong.
yeah.
We were wrong with that.
Uh, there's a distinct possibility, right, that we get to spend a lot of our raid night tonight on Razageth, and I am not really looking forward
Yeah,
to progressing phase 1 of Razageth.
yeah. I know you guys. I hope you guys clear. Yeah, that'd be awesome. You guys are crushing it this tier. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what we do next week if we extend or if we do another set of clears and then get Diurna down. So it's
It,
slightly behind you.
if you're
So
curious, like you guys were 413.4 on your Diurna prog this week. We were 414, so you're like right behind us in eye level, just
yeah, and I
really
think
close.
yeah, I think like I said, I think a couple of like healer wise, like I'm really low just overall, and so
Yeah,
like the 4 that we'll probably place in Razagath will be we'll probably be up to 414 because I think our it's funny our Dathea kill I think is higher eye level than our comp on Diurna, just based on a couple of swaps we did. So um
amazing.
but yeah but no, yeah, I think good raid weeks all around. So so cool. I think maybe we'll move into a little bit of what transpired last week in terms of major stories. I think the big thing we'll talk about is just all the patch stuff because I want to go over some interesting bugs, little preview
Yeah,
that are still active at least as of last night. I don't know if they did any hot fixes today, but some interesting Mistweaver bugs. So before we get into that though, a couple of just quick things. First up is they've added which I wish they would have said this before I did some quests on an alt. They
yeah,
added
same.
a Spark of Ingenuity skip. So basically, what it is if you haven't done any of the Spark of Ingenuity quests, the first time your alt goes to start that quest, you'll be given the option to skip it to essentially get your 5 sparks right away, which is awesome in terms of like catch ups from an alt perspective. I think there's still issues with the primals that you're not the primals that you need in terms of it's to basically craft items at a higher
Yeah,
item level, and then the other like the items that drop in mythic and heroic, right, to craft the higher item level.
Yeah.
Those are still character bound, so you still need to farm those on your alts. But at least for sparks, you can craft the base level items, get your base level embellishments going, and go
Yeah.
from there. But yeah, they added a skip, gives you 5. Don't have to do any of the quests, catch you right up for an alt. Awesome. What it doesn't do is if you've done any of the spark quests and completed them on an alt, you
Yeah.
do not get the option of that skip. So if you did like my druid, if you've done one of the 5 quests, I have to complete the other 4
Yeah.
to unlock the other 4
My
sparks. So
my monk was in the same situation pretty much. I had done 3 of them, so I hadn't done the
yeah,
halls of infusion or the like tier hold, like run around
yeah,
and siphon robots. Which actually, like, the halls of infusion one is not that bad. You can just queue for normal halls of infusion, be in and out in 10
yeah,
minutes, and you're on your way. Um, the one where you gotta go to tier hold and like do the thing to the robots is like very hit or miss. Sometimes it's extremely easy. There's nobody else around, and you just like knock it out in 5 minutes. You're done.
yeah.
Other times, like it literally took me almost an hour on my monk to get that done because there were so many other people around trying to get it. I finally just gave up and like logged back in at 2 a.m. and did it. It was that quest is really annoying. So like definitely do that one only once. Don't pick up the spark quest on any other character, and then just
Yeah.
like go do the skip on every other character. That's like my hunter hit 70 yesterday. I skipping it. No shot.
Yeah. No,
Like
100%.
if not for that one quest, I honestly wouldn't care because they're all so quick. It would be annoying,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't be too big of a deal because it takes like an hour to get through all of them except for the last one, and that's including
Yeah.
all the like travel time and stuff. But that last one sucks.
No, I agree. I agree. So yeah, it's a good skip, but if you're in the middle of it, it sucks that you can't sort of skip the rest of them. Um so yeah, so that is sort of the spark skip. Good on Blizzard, maybe not fully good on them, but at least it catches up everybody else pretty quickly. The other thing is, so last week we talked a little bit about this, but Chinese servers officially shut down. There's a bunch of sort of like tweets and posts about sort of the end of the servers. A bunch of people sort of logged in and did some stuff. So sucks that they are now fully down. But if you did want to sort of see, uh, sorry, not see, but there's some posts from the author of the what is it, Narcissus add-on,
Yeah,
which sort of
Narcissus.
so he put up a bunch of posts on sort of like the final days of it. And it's sort of kind of sad to see like people who have invested so much time into the game, seeing it shut down. Particularly when like the game is still going on elsewhere, right? Like I
Yeah,
thought a little bit about this as I sort of read through this about like what I would feel like when like WoW eventually shuts down, right? Like considering how long I've played
yeah,
and all that fun stuff. But it definitely I don't think I will feel as bad as if I was in like the Chinese players' positions of watching everybody else in the world continue to play the game and
yeah.
like me just not be able to continue to play, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
It's the other thing about this. Like, if you look at when other MMOs have shut down, right? They have like big, bombastic, like end of the world kind of events that they do.
yeah,
Um, because of the account backup feature, actually, which makes you like once you do the account backup, you can't log back in.
exactly.
So there was no big end of the world event or anything like that. It's just like unceremoniously shut off the servers at midnight, like on Thursday last
Yeah,
week.
yeah, yeah. Which is just super super sad. So, I mean, it
Yeah,
sucks for the Chinese players. Hopefully that Blizzard and whoever can start to figure out what's going on. But yeah, it's yeah, they're all down now. So I think a couple like I think we mentioned last week of the author for the Narcissus add-on basically said he's going to move to Taiwan. Well, move to Taiwan, Taiwanese servers, not move there.
yeah,
Move there physically. Yeah, I bet you there'll be a bunch of other players that sort of shift around and move to different regions to keep
yeah.
playing. But
There's
yeah,
an interesting connection to whole Hall of Fame system here. Normally, something like a third of all Hall of Fame slots in the Horde Hall of Fame are taken by Chinese guilds.
hmm
There are like they can't do that anymore. So there's like 60 something, I think it might be 70 now guilds that killed Razagev.
yeah,
Not all of them are Horde, there's like 10 alliance, right? Um and normally this is where the rate of Hall of Fame filling up starts to really rapidly increase because people are currently on Razageth and over the next couple of weeks are going to be killing it.
Right.
But all those Chinese guilds are,
they're just done. Yeah.
And I'm curious what that's going to mean for Hall of Fame, which has implications not only for like when we get cross server rating or cross server mythic rating. It also has implications like we might see some like EU and NA guilds that are not normally in Hall of Fame territory get much closer because of the lack of Chinese guilds competing for that Hall of Fame slot.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be because I mean that was the big to do in, I don't know if it was Sepulchre or Sanctum, where a
There was
bunch
Chinese
of
guilds
there's that
selling
sold
it.
Hall of Fame. Sold Hall of Fame to players, and they were filling up alliance slots like it was their job. So I mean, it's generally sucks, but it'll be interesting to see if like you start to see, a handful of guilds move up, like you said, like 20, 30 guilds start to move up in terms of the Hall of Fame and sort of capture those slots now. So
Yeah.
be interesting. So so cool. Well, I think next up on the docket is we got a 10.0.7 preview. So talk a little bit about this at the start, but Blizzard sort of, they have a roadmap they need to hit, and to hit that roadmap, content still needs to come out. So we got our first look at what's in 10.0.7. It's not a ton of detail, but there are some interesting tidbits. I mean, I think the first thing we talked about was, we're going back to the Forbidden Reach, which is the Evoker starting zone. So right now, Evokers have been sort of the only ones to visit there, and like now there'll be some max level content there for players to sort of enjoy and go through. So probably more, world quests, more story stuff to sort of, let max level players sort of dive into on the Forbidden Reach. We also got a preview of some heritage armor coming out for the Horde and the Alliance, or sorry, for humans and orcs. My fault. So humans will get their heritage armor along with orcs, which the human stuff looks super cool. Like the shoulders. Orc stuff looks very orcish.
Yes, it
Not
does.
the big, not the biggest fan. I'm not a huge heritage armor person anyway. But yeah, I think, is this the last set of races that, at least of the original races, that need their heritage armor? I
Undead don't
think
have
every
any.
other. Oh yeah, they don't. You're right. So there's probably a couple more, but
Yeah.
I think this has been one that the community's probably been sort of clamoring for a little bit in terms of like,
There's like
these are the original stuff.
there's the Warfront sets that are pretty close to like I actually don't know what the Horde one looks like. I know what the Alliance one looks like. It's like your Stormwind foot soldier kind of armor.
Uh-huh.
This is a little bit fancier. Got a little bit more bits and bobs on it. Makes it look nicer. The other thing is this is with Warfronts being like basically impossible to complete right now. Can't really acquire those at the moment.
Right.
So this is going to be, much easier to acquire than that whole Warfront set.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. So this is good. Yeah, definitely higher res than what they put out. So better refresh than like, because I think you can get like, because at least the Alliance one sort of looks like the Stormwind like knights that are around the city,
Right.
but just like more detail, a little different in the shoulders.
Yeah.
Just generally like higher quality, right? Which is cool for the Alliance. So Orc very similar. Kind of looks like the guards, but again, higher quality, a little bit more detail, all that fun stuff. So
Yeah.
heritage armor coming in for humans and orcs. One thing I wasn't aware of, and this is sort of a surprise to me, they're expanding the races that monks can be. So now monks can be Goblin, Lightforged Draenei, and Worgen, which is cool, I guess.
So the reason that these didn't get added to monk when like they added DK to everything is that monks have some unique animations. They require like actual animation work, and so I don't know about Draenei. I don't understand the Lightforged Draenei because like regular Draenei can already be this, and it should be like the same skeleton under the hood.
Yeah.
I don't understand that one, but like goblins and worgens have their own skeleton. So I'm not surprised that those ones weren't added at the same time, but they are being added in 10.0.7, so that's cool. You can be a goblin monk now, I suppose.
I could. I don't know if I will. Maybe I'll
monk,
test it out for a couple weeks.
my monk is a panda and will always be a panda.
Yeah, my monk's undead because they just have really good animations. I don't know. I love the undead animations personally. But yeah, maybe. Sorry.
The panda animations are still some of the best for monk.
You have to be a panda. Oh, it's gross. I guess the only final thing in the patch was they didn't put too much detail into, but a little bit of preview. They're refreshing Recruit a Friend, which if you haven't messed around with it, they added like a whole system around like if you do recruit a friend, you get a bunch of bonuses, but then you as the person doing the recruiting get bonuses for how long that friend stays subscribed, which I think was a cool thing.
Yeah.
It cost me, a year-long sub because number one, I don't have any friends that want to play WoW, and so I just recruited myself, just so I get the cool transmog stuff.
Oh my god.
Which I don't use because I'm such an idiot. I don't like transmog, but it's like things that are in the game.
Collect it?
Yeah, I want to collect it. I got to fill up the bar. But no, so they're doing they literally had zero information other than, hey, we're going to refresh this. So I'm assuming probably different rewards and maybe a little bit in the difference in the bonuses that you get to do recruit a friend.
They posted an article that we did talk about. And it's the same one. That was like they were announcing what the new recruiter friend was gonna like. 10.0.7 is when those changes are gonna be live.
Gotcha.
That's like there's if you remember the Uldum quests, where you like fly the biplane, like that. That's that's the like end mount for the new recruiter friend is that biplane, which is cool.
Oh, cool.
Also like up-resed in like new textures and all that, so it looks better than the Uldum 2013 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Was it even Kata was more like 2010, wasn't it?
It was
a while ago. Yeah.
Funny. Yeah, that's cool. So yeah, so they announced all that in 10.0.7, which is cool. It's a fairly, I mean, it's not a small patch, also not a big patch, but I think I think they right sized it in terms of like some new outdoor content, some new just like changes for people like collecting people to chase, right?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So
yeah.
Yeah, so yes, that's sort of 10.0.7. We'll know more once it's on PTR. They didn't really release any sort of class changes, which I mean, judging by what they're talking about, I think they're coming. They did do a post, not monk specific, but I think they did a post that they're going to sort of look at Ret and do a big redesign on Ret in 10.0.7.
Yeah, so I actually am really curious. I don't know if we'll get a post, but I am really curious if we will get a similar revision for Brewmaster.
Okay.
So actually, this week, let me see if I can find what Sinzu posted. He posted an article on Peak about blackout combo. One of the things in there is Tiger Palm damage. So I've got the diagram here. This is Tiger Palm damage with different multipliers. So like the base value is 1/3 of your attack power. And you stack up all these things. Like you stack up your tier set is like 4% better. Stack face palm on that doubles it. Stack counter strikes on that doubles it again. Now you're up to not 1/3, but 1 plus 1/3 of your attack power. Then you blackout combo it. Now you're at almost 3 times your attack power. Weapons of Order, 3.5. If you crit, 7 times your attack power.
Yeah.
And if you get a Bone Dust Brew proc, you're at 10 times your attack power. So you're stacking all of these modifiers on Tiger Palm that can take Tiger Palm from being absolutely like worthless amounts of damage to being very, very relevant amounts of damage. Which is like, so the things that they talked about in the Retribution Paladin post, there were like stacking damage multipliers in order to do huge bursts of damage, which is not really what the case is with Tiger. Tiger Palm is not huge bursts of damage. It like takes it from being like irrelevant damage to relevant damage. But the other thing that they talk about is button bloat. Retribution Paladins have a lot of buttons to do those big bursts, and that, people call them like piano specs. are hard to play for mechanical reasons. Like
Right.
anything where your like rotational stuff extends beyond that 12 button action bar is honestly just genuinely much harder to do. Like
Oh yeah.
going from like 10 buttons in your rotation to 15 buttons is a massive increase in difficulty.
Right.
Unless they're like mostly things you can macro together. Brewmaster is kind of in that situation. I don't think it quite extends to 15 unless you're like really going crazy and picking active that you possibly can.
Hmm.
But you do extend beyond that basic action bar.
Right.
And that does like a lot of them, unlike something like Retribution Paladin, where a lot of the Ret Paladin ones are like there's a mixture of like 45-second cooldowns with like 90-second cooldowns, and so you line up all your cooldowns, and that's part of the gameplay of Retribution Paladin of doing those bursts. For
Right.
Brewmaster, it's like 80% stuff that's like sub 15 seconds.
Yeah.
So there's just
It's a
like
lot.
a lot of buttons to juggle on very low cooldowns. And like that can be fun and interesting, but it's also like maybe not the right challenge that they're looking for, like right place to get that challenge. Because you mostly like legitimately, if you just keep your like Egg Smash, Rising Sun Kick, Blackout Kick, and Breath of Fire on cooldown as much as possible, you're like 80%
Right.
of the way there. So it's really not there, not something you have to think about too much. It's just like the like, okay, you have to actually have key bindings for all of these on GCD low cooldown abilities.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. And that's it just becomes like to your point, button bloat, but then also just like if if you're required to be competitive, making sure you hit the buttons in the right order, it becomes almost like like again, mechanical overload where like if you don't do this, you're somehow irrelevant. Not irrelevant, but like your damage becomes so much lower.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Because the game is like balanced upon the fact that like you need to I'm not gonna say high roll, but that's sort of the idea is like you basically need to high roll in terms of like your button presses and min max that to make sure you do
yeah,
relevant damage. And your class is balanced around that. Where like if you mess it up, you're then below average, right? In general.
yeah. And it's one of
So
those things where like you can practice and reach the point that you can execute. And that's cool and it feels good to reach that point, but also it's really annoying for Brewmaster in particular that just like you just look at the number of buttons and it's like I don't really
yeah.
want all those.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
and this is where you get into things like Tiger Palm is just not a very, you know, it's cool when you get literally, you go from what you literally buff the damage of Tiger Palm by 30 times. You go from
Yeah.
1/3 of your attack power to 10 times your attack power, and like that's 30 times damage on Tiger Palm, and that's kind of neat. But also, you know, sometimes you get the 1/30th of that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Which just yeah. Feels great when it happens, feels terrible every other time it does.
Yeah,
So um but yeah, so that's I mean that's 10.0.7 and I think sort of in a nutshell. And um yeah, I mean hopefully I mean we should see it on PTR shortly, and then they have like what is it? This summer is 10.1, so we only have a couple more months before we'll see 10.0.7 and then 10.1 right after it. So
yeah. I think we'll see the
uh,
10.1 PTR come out like immediately after the 10.0.7 release.
yeah, if not to be completely honest with you, maybe before. Right. And the
Maybe.
only reason I say that is like if they want to get out in the summer and you want to let 10.7 simmer for a little bit, at least like two months, right?
Right.
Like at this point, like they're gonna have to get 10.7 out in March, April timeframe, and
I
then
mean, if
you know
they wanted to
in June.
release um they wanted to release 10.1 at the end of March and they wanted 8 weeks of PTR for it, they would have to open up the 10.1 PTR like next week.
Yeah.
But if they wanted end of April, then they would have until the end of February to.
Right. Yeah. Which means I don't know if the 10.7 goes live before the end of February, right?
I suspect it will. Because 10.0.5 was this week, it was like the last week of January, basically. Last week of February honestly would feel kind of right for 10.0.7. It's another minor content patch.
Yeah,
But
sure.
I could also see them like putting up the 10.1 PTR or having a shorter PTR cycle for it, like
That's
going with
true.
6 weeks instead of 8 weeks, and trying to get that out the door so that there's not as much of a gap in like the world content. Because I think that is for the rest of the world that isn't, rating.
Yeah.
That is like the bigger thing is like, is there new world content, new quest lines, new stuff to do, new dungeons would be great, but not quite
Yeah.
yet.
Not yet. Not yet. Well, cool. Yeah. So we'll see how they push out the rest of it. See how quickly these things come out. So, um, cool. So final thing before we start talking a little bit about our experience in 10.5 this week, a little bit more than just the raid. Um, we did get news that a member of the WoW Classic team, Brian Birmingham, has left Blizzard. Probably, I guess, forcibly left might be the way, or like was fired, terminated. So Brian, if you're not familiar, was technical lead on Classic, and I think he's also the individual that first got like through all the interviews. I think I remember him being the person who actually built the original Classic like proof of concept, right? Like got it
Yeah,
working in the modern client with the modern data structure. Like that was sort of what he was working on. One of like the first maybe like 3 or 4 developers on Classic. And so he was technical lead, pretty big part of like basically like resurrecting or building Classic. And so he was terminated this week, or I guess terminated is the right word because that's what they said in all the articles. And primarily he was terminated because of I guess a policy of Blizzard called stack ranking. And so if no one's familiar with stack ranking, it's sort of in the corporate world. Essentially, you get ranked on a scale of 1 to 10, or no, you're not on a scale. You get ranked against your peers 1 to whatever. So if there are 10 people in your department, yeah, your managers or your leadership will rank you 1 through 10 as the number one being the best performer, number 10 being sort of the worst performer. And typically with stack ranking, there's a bell curve, right? So like you will have most people in like a consistent with type methodology in the middle, and then you'll have your top performers and your bottom performers, right? And that's sort of how it works. And generally, you'll have like numbers you need to hit as a management. And I know so much about this because my company does this. Like we have done this for like 10, 15 years, like since I've been in my company. So very, very familiar with stack ranking. The problem is, and I think Brian highlights one of the issues is that he was being forced through this latest round of reviews of placing people on that lower end of the bell curve, right? Typically, when you review people, you want to give them a fair ranking or fair rating for what they've done. And the problem with stack ranking is that it forces some people to be in that. I think they use the term developing at Blizzard, but like the lower side of the bell curve.
right.
You sort of are forced to place people in there. And Brian didn't agree. And so, I think Bloomberg put out a story. I also think there was some behind the scenes where like Brian really wasn't making a statement about this. He was just like, I don't agree with this. I'm going to, not go through with it. And Blizzard said, you're fired because I just think Brian's point was, I'm not going to work until this policy's changed. And Blizzard was like, okay, we'll see you later,
Yeah,
which is like, their prerogative to do that. But then after the story was broke and people were sort of clamoring for a response, Brian sort of put out a sort of a full post about a little bit of the behind the scenes from Blizzard and the fact that a lot of the stack ranking is coming from the Activision Blizzard King like part of the organization, which I think people forget that like there is a parent company above Blizzard that owns and tells them what to do. And
yeah,
people say it's Activision, but technically it's Activision, Blizzard, and King. So it's sort of
yeah,
conglomerate of a bunch of people who sort of run all three organizations as one. And they've seems like they've had stank ranking at Activision for a while. They do it at King too. So it's really now they're just enforcing it on Blizzard.
yeah.
Um,
And it's,
wi-
I mean, it's one of those things. So the history of that is like it came out of GE in
yeah,
the 70s and 80s, and um, they just like it came from the top there. New CEO wants to make a mark. Came from the top there. All of the like research that's been done on it, as far as its efficacy over the intervening 50 years, has shown it to be ineffective. Because what happens is, you know, sometimes there are underperformers and managers are just like unwilling to deal with it, and that's a problem, right?
right.
But a lot of the time, there's your top performers, and then there's just kind of everybody else, and there's not really a, you know, cutting your bottom 10% doesn't actually cut, just the low performers. It cuts into your actual like workforce, and then you have to replace them and train them, and you lose knowledge and you lose experience, and it's and it creates like a competitive situation where your peers, you're competing with them because you need to make sure, like, there's two ways to end up, above that, bottom X%, whatever the percent is, bottom X%. One is to improve yourself, to make sure that you don't end up in that bottom 10%, and the other is to sabotage other people so that they do,
or don't help them, right? Like it's the idea, like you basically become protective of what you do, and you sort of over embellish your own highlights and sort of diminish teammate highlights, right? It does create some sense of a competitive environment when you have to have people in the lower end. And I'll say that's the one thing, like when I went through it, as a manager, I get to do this. It sounds really bad, but I have to do this like every year, right? In terms of stack ranking, and we don't have that mandate. So we don't have the mandate that a certain percentage has to be in the bottom, but we do have that we can only put a certain percentage at the top, right? So like we have limits for how, and we do it a little bit more granular. We actually have like the bulk of it, and then we have 3 levels above the bulk, which is like varying levels of higher and higher performance. And so we have like, maybe I can put one person at the very top, and 2 people like significantly above, a handful above, and then the bulk of my team sits in sort of the consistent area. And yeah, I mean, so for one, personally, I like Brian is totally against this. 100% agree that it does create like competitiveness between teams or between teammates. But I will tell you that, like, at least from my experiences, if you walk into this environment and like it's already there, and like as a manager, you foster like, look, like there are going to be people who are better at this, and there are going to be people who are worse than this. But if we work together as a team, we're still a team. Sometimes it works out, but I think it depends on how it's presented. And it seemed like in this case, this was like a mandate coming down from on high that says you must do this, which is never the way it works out. Like, I think you have to have the culture you have to have a built-in culture that supports this sort of ranking, like this sort of performance management system, right, at a company versus it like forcing people to follow it. So it sucks that we lose Brian, because he seemed like he really enjoyed like pushing for Classic to be there. And it sucks that like, I think I think for me it works fine in my business because I'm not a creative. Like, my business is very metrics driven. It's very like there are fine results. It's not like hey, we put out a good game, or hey, I made a good model, like, and my art is good, or like I code really well, right? Like, I'm not in that space. I'm very much in like you sold X amount of work this quarter. That was your target. You either met it or you didn't meet it, right? It's like it's much more, I think, in terms of like metrics and stuff like that. It's much more metrics driven versus in game design, where it's very creative, very much like not as quantitative, probably more like qualitative in that case. So probably doesn't work there. So it sucks, but it's fun. To me, it's funny that reading all the replies from like his thread, Brian's thread, Twitter thread, and some of the other replies, some of the tweets that are happening, and people are like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is stupid. I'm like, well, like, I get it. It doesn't work in game design, but like there are other areas of business where like I think stack ranking is fine. Like, I think it's just.
It also sounds like you do not the same stack ranking. Like, there's like the thing when people are talking about stack ranking that they really get up in arms about. Like, I think there is value in being forced to sit down and think about who is your top performers, who's not. Like, being forced to think through that and like report that. I think there's actually like real value that across like different fields.
Right.
The thing that people get up in arms about is when you have it tied to like the GE style mandate that you cut the bottom 10%.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's a very different thing than what you described. Like, you're more into like, I'm forced to sit down and like I can identify the high performers, and like we have the like everybody that's in the consistent bucket, and there's like the slightly higher performers, and maybe you identify like an underperformer or something, or a couple of them, or however many there are, but you're not like sitting there going, well, the bottom 10% of the people that I rank are going to get fired.
Yeah, no, no, we're not like there have been years of the recession that has been the case, but but it like that's an economy thing. That's not a like every year we sort of do
Yeah,
that, right? It's more of
yeah,
like based on like the fact that the economy's. But in any event, yeah, no, that probably is the biggest difference. Is like, yeah, we're not forced to do the cuts,
yeah,
which I can agree does prevent like does sort of target that hostile or like that competitiveness within a team that can be bad. Also, like my job doesn't like we need our team to talk to each other, but I don't like they don't I don't know. I don't collaborate with a lot of my team, right? Like we work together, we have like certain objectives, but not like I'm not doing one component of what they need to do and we need to have like a work together relationship, but like
right.
they have their own stuff, I have my own stuff and we're sort of working in the same direction but not like with off each other, which I think in game design, like in designers, like in game design, like in Blizzard's perspective, like yeah, you need your team to be on the same page moving forward and maybe
Yeah,
working off each other to like, build a product and deliver it. So
yeah,
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 a little different. So but yeah, it sucks to lose Brian. But I mean, to his credit, didn't like the policy, basically told, Blizzard, we're not gonna work under this policy. I think it's, I'm gonna put my foot down and he did. It sucks he lost his job, but I think out of this, like you know,
I
I
mean,
think I think I think from everything I've heard that came out about Brian, everybody loved him as a manager, right? As
yeah,
everybody that worked with him. So
yeah.
hopefully he lands on his feet.
I,
So
I think one of the interesting things here in the wake of all of the stuff that happened, you know, I guess it's a couple years ago now,
yeah.
the sexual harassment lawsuits and all of that. The Blizzard team seems very willing to be very outwardly like, yeah, this is unacceptable. You know,
Yeah.
a little bit of like an activist workforce kind of thing. And that is, especially in the aftermath of
Oh yeah.
the stuff that happened, that is honestly really good. Like, this is the kind of management that they like. This is a manager setting example of how things should be, and like huge props to him. This is like putting his own neck on the line in protest, and losing it, but still doing the right thing, and I think that's very cool. And I can
Yeah.
understand why people would like him as a manager, seeing like what he did for his employees.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So no, yeah, it's very yeah, it's very, very cool for him and for them. Um so yeah, so sucks to lose Brian, but I mean, um yeah, to your point, yeah, standing up is good. And I think a bunch of other Blizzard folks have come out and been like, yeah, this is sort of not the way. So maybe next year they have a conversation about like, does this work for Blizzard, right? Like in terms of their culture and what they're trying to do as a company under the ABK, I guess they say banner. Um, so cool. So I guess for the last like 30 minutes or so, we'll go through some of our fun week in 10.0.5. Basically outside of the raid, we'll focus on. We sort of already talked about
Yeah,
how our raid week went, which was, I think good for both of us. But yeah, in terms of 10.0.5, like major things that have come out, maybe next week we can talk a little about the trading post. I'm actually excited for it just to see what it is. While it's in the patch, it doesn't actually start until February 1st. So I think
yeah.
that's Wednesday this week.
If you open the like adventure guide thing, it opens the trading post panel, which for this week is just empty. So that's a little
Exactly.
bit awkward. Like maybe there should have been like when you opened up the Mythic Plus like panel for the first time, it tells you, oh hey, this is thundering, and like you know
Yeah.
here's what Plus is and how you get started, and then you go to the trading post one, you open it up, it's like this is empty. It looks like it's broken. What's going on?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll get into maybe trading post stuff for next week and see how
Yeah,
we like it since it's not just live yet. But a couple other things did go live. So we've got the catalyst this week,
yep,
which was fun. So interesting way that works is that basically you get a quest, fill up a bar. You fill up that bar by doing various things around the world. I'll tell you, if you did this day one, it was very easy. Kill the world boss on your main and then your alt, and you're done. World
yeah,
bosses were giving 50% of the bar. That's been hot fixed. I think it's only 20% now.
yeah.
Um,
Which is still like fine. Like you do that on your
yeah,
main, you do some other content on your main, and you're like 90% of the way done without even really thinking
yeah,
about it.
exactly. And the good thing is, so the quest, I think this might be the first instance of this, but the quest progress is shared between all your characters.
Yeah,
So if you do 50% on your main and then you get log on an alt and do another 50%, the quest completes. and then you unlock the currency on all of your characters to do an upgrade. And it's also retroactive, meaning like if you start a character today, you will start with, and you did the quest last week to unlock a catalyst upgrade. You have one starting on that character immediately.
Yep.
So there's no catch up and anything like that. So honestly, I'm fine with the way that they did this. I will say though, I'm slightly upset that I used my catalyst upgrade on a piece and then got got it on a heroic. I got a heroic helm that replaced it.
That just sounds like a mistake, man.
I was I didn't think we were doing heroic, so I was just like, I'll use the upgrade here. It gets me like it was like an 8 or 9 eye level upgrade. I was like, cool, use it, great. And then they're like, oh, we'll do heroic. I'm like,
I did we did heroic. We actually did a heroic sale on Thursday. Nice. Which was nice. My gold reserves were running a little bit low. So we did a sale of that. Did not come out with the tier helm again. So I finally I just went and did some keys targeting the plate helm, which drops from like Nokud, Quarter Stars, and Shadow Moon Burial Ground, which are two of those three are very easy.
Yeah.
Just like jam some 20s, got my plate helm, dumped some valor into it, and converted it into a tier piece, and that was like a 10 high level upgrade.
Oh geez, nice.
Yeah,
very cool.
The other thing this week, with the completion of the Sparks quest, you have the ability for new Spark currency items to drop. It's not literally the Spark. You get, what is it called? It's like the bottled essence thing.
Bottled
you take
essence,
to the Spark machine, and it turns it into a Spark of Ingenuity.
Mm-hmm.
Those can drop from anything. Very much Legion Legendary style. Dirt piles, Mythic Plus, boxes from Reputations, World Boss, rares, like you name it, it can drop it. There's internal hidden bad luck protection that you can't see. And I mean, there's a couple people in my guild that did a little bit of grinding to try and get it more or less unsuccessfully. Like, people heard that you could get it from dirt piles, and so one guy opened like 350 dirt piles. And turns out dirt piles don't have a very high drop rate of it. Somebody just got lucky.
Yeah.
Genuinely, I think the way to approach this. So one of the problems with the Legion Legendary system is that it had these huge power gains tied behind it. Like, Legion would have been significantly better in that regard if the first 5 legendaries you got just came from a quest, and you got to pick your 5 legendaries, which is basically the situation we're in with the Sparks, right? Like, these extra Sparks, like your first 5, even if you mess up an embellishment and you have to get a second or third embellishment item, which is actually kind of the case for me, these extra ones are like, I'm taking an item that is currently 405 to 418, but it's like a bracer, right?
Yeah.
It's not anything big.
Yeah, it's not a huge stat. Yeah, it's not a huge statted item.
So
yeah, no, I think it's a good, it's a nice system. But yeah, I don't think we saw any of those drop. We did. I mean, nobody in the guild has sort of said anything about it, but
we've had like a couple drop.
Yeah. So that is, I'd forgotten all about that. So yes, that's a part of the Spark thing. The other thing in 10.5, which I absolutely hate, this is the stupidest thing they ever did, was that it's Storm's Fury, which is like a new like world event in the Hourglass Zone, where like there's a attack of elementals, or I guess primalists. And you have to like kill like or defend or break a bunch of portals and then kill a boss. The boss is horrendous. I don't know if you've done it.
I haven't.
So just be prepared to set aside like just to kill the boss at the end, probably 20-25 minutes.
They nerfed the health of it. I saw they nerfed it by like 50%.
Good, yeah, because when I did it on Tuesday, it had something like 60 or 80 million health, and it has 2 immune phases. So, and the ads also had like, I think like 10 or 15 million. You had to kill 3 of them.
Yeah.
Like I literally was trying to get it done before raid, and it took me 20 minutes. I was like, oh, this will give me percentage, so that's great. Like, I'll do this world quest, get percentage, and like get my catalyst item, right? Or catalyst quest completed. Number 1, didn't get percentage. Number 2, took 20 minutes to do. and like it was god awful,
Yeah.
god awful.
The I mean, I'll say I'm one of those people, but I might be the only person that plays with like the experience bar turned off.
Okay.
Like whenever I can, I played with it on this expansion because I was running with a fairly minimal UI, and so I just
Mhm.
couldn't turn it off. Um, but I normally play with it off. So, like I got the Catalyst quest and I untracked it,
Nice,
and I just did
nice.
stuff. And like I have no idea how much percent stuff gives. I went Friday afternoon before raid, and I was done. So I just went and turned it in. But that's one of the
Nice.
perks. Again, one of the perks of raiding on the weekend. Our raid
Yeah.
nights Friday. I had Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday afternoon to finish this Catalyst quest.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. Yeah. And I sort of rushed on Tuesday to get it done in that hour we had before raid started. But yeah, I mean, Storm's Fury, I guess it's cool. There's a bunch of cosmetic rewards you can buy from continuing to do the event. Um, it does drop a box from like the World Quest. I don't know if that has a chance to drop sparks or not. Um, but um, but yeah, it's there. It's just that I didn't realize they nerfed the health of it because that's good because
Yeah,
that was just it was stupid.
I saw that in the hotfix
Um,
list. I was like, huh, that's funny.
yeah, it was bad.
It
And
sounds like the guy that tuned Mythic Razagath tuned that.
oh, God, it's something ridiculous. Yeah. And then the only final, I guess, new thing that's coming in is the Mage Tower's back. They talked about this way back when, before Dragonflight even launched. They were going to turn off the Mage Tower, at least for the opening patch, and it would come back at some point. And so now it is back. So if you don't have your transmog, you're missing certain transmogs, go do the Mage Tower. I think I'm going to do it on my Druid just to get the Druid bear form
Yeah.
skin. Um, but
So one of the things that I've heard is it's actually quite a bit easier than it was, at least
mhm,
for some classes. Like I heard Protection Paladin is a lot easier. I suspect
cool.
for Brewmaster it's going to be a lot easier too, because one of the main hard parts for Brew was just the self sustain and the talent changes, which we haven't talked about yet. But the talent changes that came with this patch, um, actually do a lot for your self sustain in situations where you're not taking enough damage to spawn a bunch of Gifted the Ox orbs and also have a healer pocket, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Spirit of the Ox is actually really good. I've had a lot of fun with it. I've done some raiding, some keys on my monk this week. It feels like it went from like constantly being at like one or two orbs on expel harm and feeling like I needed more. So like now every time I want to push it, I have like 4 or 5. It feels nice.
Pretty good.
And that genuinely like expel harm is such a good button right now. Like
Nice.
the other
Nice.
thing is I think I misspoke on this podcast back in the like beta phase. Strength of Spirit in the class tree doesn't say this, but it does buff the healing of your expel harm orbs.
Oh, cool.
So if you're low health, they get, basically double healing, which is a lot. Like that does literally let you effectively expel harm and lay on hands yourself.
Nice. Nice.
And then you have to wait for more orbs to generate, right? But these new talents help with that. Like you still take Gift of the Ox, you still get that, but now you also have Spirit of the Ox generating even more. And one of the interesting pieces of that is it's tied to your rotation, so it's tied to pushing Blackout Kick and Rising Sun Kick.
Yeah.
So it's, even though it's like kind of passive, it is not pushing Blackout Kick and Rising Sun Kick is like the most common problem that I see when I look at people that come into Peak and they ask like what's going wrong, why am I like gray parsing? It's like you're not pushing
Right.
Blackout Kick, you're not pushing Rising Sun Kick. Sometimes you're just not pushing enough things overall. But a lot of
Right.
times it's like skipping those in favor of pushing more Tiger Palms because they see the brew cooldown reduction on Tiger Palm. They're like, oh, I want that. Or pushing Spinning Crane Kick because they like heard in Shadowlands that you like push Spinning Crane Kick for single target damage and didn't really understand why. And that the reasons for that no longer apply. So,
Fair enough.
yeah.
Interesting.
Brew talent changes are good.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, maybe we can talk. Yeah. I'll say on the Mistweaver side, because we got a bunch of changes. They also seem really good. People are sort of loving the the inclusion of Shaylun's gift or Shaylun's gift. Sorry, I can never remember the name of it. And yeah, I mean it's been fun. There's been some interesting, we'll say, tech involved in terms of like Shaylun's gift. So I think it talked a little bit about this last week, but once you pick Shaylun's gift, the talent immediately after that is two options. Basically, number one of the options gives you clouds, doubles the rate at which clouds spawn, which basically means you stack to 10 clouds, quicker,
Yeah.
or you stack up the healing increase quicker, um, and things like that. And the other one is called Lessons and of Xiaohao, and that basically every time you use Shaylun's gift, you get one of four buffs for a varying amount of time up to 30 seconds. So if you consume 10 clouds, it's a 30-second buff. Less than 10 is like, cuts the 30 seconds down, I think by 5 seconds for each cloud. You're below 10. And that's been interesting because there's honestly what we didn't really like. We knew the buffs were decent. The random nature of them seemed like maybe not the one you'd want. You'd want the other one for the consistent healing. We found though is that really there's not a bad buff in the four. There's one extremely good one. There's one very good one, and then there's two good ones, right? So like generally speaking, any of the four you get really good. So you sort of now there's sort of a meta that's or a play style that's evolving or emerging where like you use Shaylun's gift to proc the buff and then use that buff through your healing. So it's basically almost like a precast, sort of like your trinket activation almost.
Yeah.
And there are some interesting logs where like people are high rolling like a Razageth shield and they're doing 100,000, 110,000 HPS off of just like hitting a good Shaylun's, hitting Chi-Ji, and just DPSing, like not actually casting spells, like just DPSing. So
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been fun to use that, to sort of think about ways to use that. It is a little bit more difficult to use, so I would say like as a player, if you sort of the standard play style still works of using like Invoker's Delight, Rising Mist, and Chi-Ji, right, the standard one. But yeah, Shaylun's gift is an option. The changes to Yu'lon, so Yu'lon basically got a 50% reduction in the cost of enveloping mist when you use it. So a better increase is now fairly decent. I think you still will probably run into mana issues without an innervate, or some level of mana reduction when you do play Yu'lons, but it's much closer, and I think it's probably viable in certain cases. And yeah, those are the two, I think, biggest changes. So the Shaylun's gift with Lessons has been really fun to sort of mess around with and try and game. I'm terrible at it, so I didn't run it on Diurna. But yeah, I think it's definitely an option to play.
One of the things that I've seen as well, this got linked to me as a log that people thought were exploited.
Yeah, Argo linked me one too.
The like Primal Council, I guess you press Feline Stomp and you just like spin.
Yeah, so they buff the healing of spinning Crane Kick while you're in Feline Stomp also.
Okay.
And because Council is consistent for target cleave, like you can just sit there and spin. Now, there is a bug with that, which is interesting in that if you talent into Ancient Concordance and I always forget the other one, but you talent into the 3 points. Oh yeah, if you talent into those, cast Feline, stand in it, and change talents, you never lose the buffs.
Right.
And so you can essentially, maybe I say this out loud so more people exploit and it gets fixed, but you can essentially keep those two talents with your Feline Stomp active and then also be able to take Rising Mist and what's Invoker's Delight, the haste buff.
Yeah.
And so like that just, giga buffs your HPS. So like, I think Argo linked me one log that individual, if it's the same log, was not exploiting that sort of bug.
That's the one I saw was not exploiting.
Yeah, but you can definitely exploit it. And the only issue is when you die, you lose the buffs. You kind of have to do the same talent changing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and yeah, I guess Onion saying like, you don't even have to use Feline Stomp to keep the buffs are just always active, regardless if you're in your Feline or not. Yeah. So, yeah, it's that log for Primal Council and just spinning Crane Kick plus Feline is it's crazy. It really only works there in the raid, just because it's the only way to get consistent 4-target cleave. Like I think a couple of people have asked about it on like Kurag, and like it's really only maybe 2 targets in intermission there, so it's not as good.
And like you look at like on Dathea, right? on Dathea, you get a platform phase every like minute versus the constant 4 targets of Primal Council.
Exactly.
And then even like Diurna, if you're in the ad group, I could see it being good for just raw blanket throughput on Diurna, but Diurna is so much burst healing. It's not like taking damage. You're not taking huge amounts of taking damage. You're doing, you do a triple egg break, your whole raid gets like nuked, and then you heal it back up and you do it again.
Exactly. Plus with Diurna too, there's a ton of movement. So like if you're not using the exploit, you're
the Fey line very easily.
Yeah, exactly. So that becomes another issue. But yeah, no, and plus also with Diurna, like I feel like the majority of the healing in that fight is in phase 2 anyway. So like you basically make phase 1 easier, which technically
phase 2 is slightly shorter than phase 1. They're like actually about 50-50. And in the current logs at least, like if you're doing 11 egg, then it's about 50-50. If you're doing 12 egg, it's like 64. 60% phase 1, 40% phase 2, but damage goes up in phase 2 because she gets a ramping buff.
Right.
Like the longer you spend in phase 2, the more damage she does to the raid. Most of it is avoidable, not all of it though.
Yeah. Yeah. Gotcha. So yeah, so it's I mean the changes to Mistweaver seem really good in terms of like, the build diversity now. I mean, I think now there's probably you can run a different build on almost every boss. Like there's not just the set your talents and forget. Nice. I think you can do that for the most part, but there's definitely some bosses where you can eke out, more HPS, even more damage, right? If you, slightly change your spec. I think Council is the biggest example. Like you just run Awakened, run the Feline Stomp build and just profit, right? Because it's a ton of damage and it's just a ton of healing.
I think Brewmaster, really, you only touch a couple of talent points on most fights. It's very, very much kind of set and forget. There's, and it depends. There's like, I think, really 3 variations, maybe 4. And it really boils down to how offensive or defensive you want to be, and then whether you have mass AoE. Like, what's your target? Gotcha. If you're in constant 3 or 4 targets, like a Primal Council scenario, then you play 1. If you're less than that, you play a different one. So and then there's another build for keys, right? So it's a little bit more set and forget. I don't think you really are looking at changing most talents for every boss, but there's a couple like flex points that you can play around with on different bosses, and that matters. Like there's things like training of Neozao is like more damage.
Gotcha.
But then some bosses you want light brewing because of Celestial Brew timing. So like Diurna, you should 100% play light brewing on Diurna. You really don't need it on like Karag. You can play Training of Neozao. There's a lot of auto attack damage that you take on Karag. The Training of Neozao is also good defensively there, but it also is just more damage because it lets you you get 15% mastery, and then that's just more damage.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah, I mean it sounds like, I mean, changes wise across the class, it's been at least maybe between Brewmaster Mistweaver, because Windwalker didn't really get touched. Yeah, I mean the Mistweaver stuff's really awesome in terms of like what it brings to the table. So it's fun to mess around with. I mean personally need to practice with Shaylun's Gift a lot more, because I think that's going to end up being like what you play long term. But no, the build diversity is just crazy, which is super cool. So and Shaylun's is huge. Like I would talk mostly about raid and all of this, but like Shaylun's is huge in keys now, because it gives Mistweaver something that we've somewhat lacked. It is like the ability to respond to like large amounts of damage to like multiple people, right? And so our only way to do
that's not revival.
Yeah, it was either revival or having really good renewing mist spread. So like our Vivify cleaves would heal people up, but still that's like 4 or 5 casts to top people off just from the cleave. And if there's more damage, or there's back-to-back damage events, like you just fall behind, right? And so like Shaylun's, particularly the non-lessons version of Shaylun's, I forget what the name of it is, but the one that makes the cloud stack up faster. In higher keys, I think is actually, I think you can play both, but I think that's helpful as you're learning, because it just makes it like you can cast max rank Shaylun's like every, whatever I forget how it's a cloud every 4 seconds, so it's every 40 seconds you'll have like a max rank
Yeah.
challenge, which is just big in terms of damage,
Yeah.
right? Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's super cool.
Speaking
Um,
of talent bugs, though, there've been a
mhm.
lot. There's a guy that we ran into. They got reported that they can't. They're a Retribution Paladin. They have every choice in every choice node active. They basically have two different talent builds active at the same time, and they can't change their talents.
Oh, really?
They're stuck. So they can't change talent builds. They can't like untalent things. They are just hard stuck. But they have effectively every talent.
Jesus.
And that's really big. Uh and so they were popping into like the Paladin Discord where there was a big discussion about it, and they've sent videos and things to Blizzard. They are not like they're like, I'm trying not to get banned for this, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Um but there's been other things like Rogue's cheat death got moved. So
Okay.
I haven't, it logs as if they still have cheat death in both locations.
Oh, interesting.
So they have
Interesting.
cheat death in the new location and in the old location, which is not possible.
Hmm.
Um, but there's been a bunch of issues as well. Like every talent tree that got changed has had issues where like Brewmaster, you had to like some people had to like switch to Windwalker and then switch back and
Yeah.
then reset talents, and then you could like do your thing. Um,
Our hunters had to do that actually. I feel
yeah.
like. Yeah.
So there's been a bunch of issues with that, both in game and then be very careful looking at talent logs, any talent trees that got changed. We've gotten on Warcraft logs, we've gotten most of it ironed out, but there's still some edge cases that we're aware of. Like there's a talent for um it's so funny. I was talking with Zephyrus about some of the talent stuff. Like we were working on fixing a bunch of the issues we'd run into. And I
Hmm.
think one of the things that came up is like the only thing that we know of that is like really going to screw us over is if they just swap the position of two talents in the same talent. That's like the one thing that would really, ruin our day is if they swap two node. Like they don't change anything else. It's just the position of the two talents within the node, within the choice node, just flips.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that happened to warlocks,
Oh
undocumented by
God.
the way. They just had a
Nice.
node at the bottom of their class tree just like get flipped. Um, and so that got reported to me last night. I haven't looked further into it, but it did look like the combat log was logging the wrong thing, which has been a common problem with these. That's the issue with like the rogue cheat death thing. Is combat log is
Yeah.
actually logging that they have two copies of cheat death.
Oh no. Yeah. So then it's
Which,
yeah, you guys
if
to
you knew
decipher.
about it and could abuse it, then maybe you could get a different talent build. I don't know.
Yeah.
But as far as we know, as soon as you like reset talents successfully, it goes away. So
Gotcha.
it's like extremely difficult to try and abuse that because like you'd have to like figure it out and then not ever reset talents again.
Yeah.
And that's even assuming that you actually have the second copy and it's not just a bug in their combat log stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Where they see it and they basically enter it twice, right? They didn't never remove like the whatever the routine
Right.
is to add it
Well,
for the old node.
so
Yeah.
what it is like for rogues specifically, like so the different talent nodes have like types, right? There's a choice node, and then there's a single point node, and there's a node with ranks. There's different kinds of nodes. So they changed the old choice node that had cheat death into it to a single choice node, or like to
Hmm.
a single point node. But didn't actually remove the internal like choice of cheat death, and you can see this in the game data if you like dig around in the API.
Hmm.
So the second copy of cheat death actually still exists. It's just
Gotcha.
unreachable. But if you
Oh, interesting.
already had it, what it shows in the talent UI is that you've got Unbreakable Stride talented, which is the
Gotcha.
new talent that's in its place that is kind of useless in PvE, so you probably shouldn't play it. But what it likely is just people not changing their talent builds,
Hmm.
and then it logging the wrong thing. Like they actually have Unbreakable Stride, but because they didn't actually change talents, it just like logs
Yeah. It's
the
still set there.
incorrect thing now. I don't know. It's really janky and buggy, and I've spent a bunch of time this week doing like whack-a-mole bug fixes for all the different ways that they broke
Gotcha.
talent stuff.
That sucks. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's definitely been a lot more noticeable bugs, and they've been around for a lot longer. We'll say,
Yeah.
which probably just is there's more of them, so there's more time to fix everything.
Although credit
But
where
yeah,
credit's due, Bear's talent tree went live and was like completely broken. It was
yeah,
awful. Like that honestly should have been fixed before it went live, but I guess they've got a schedule to keep. And that's actually like going back to a previous subject. One of the things that Brian Birmingham was talking about as a
yeah,
problem from the like top-down management of ABK for Blizzard is that they were the ones pushing the timelines of like releasing the expansions at specific dates,
yeah,
like in time for Christmas 2022. You know.
yeah.
Um. Anyway, that all got fixed in like a Tuesday hotfix. So like there was
Gotcha.
literally a day one patch for the 10.5 patch, which is
Yeah,
hilarious. But they did get fixed and it now works. And apparently some of the new talents are good.
that's good.
I don't know if
Yeah, I
they're
haven't heard
actually
much from.
better, but Feral Druids and Boomkin are happy.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, yeah. It's been crazy the amount of bugs we've seen. And like, yeah, this
Yeah.
mystery one is just it's the longest I think I've ever seen anything. So,
I mean,
um,
it's not like
sorry.
there weren't bugs. Like if you remember the launch of Shadowlands, right? There were a lot of bugs there too. They were just specifically with like the Covenant stuff because nothing else changed in the game
Yeah,
pretty much. Like in the
exactly.
Covenant stuff,
Yeah,
uh, just like was incredibly buggy. And it like slowly got fixed and everything got patched up. But yeah,
right, right. Yeah, no, it's been been an interesting start to
the
the
patch to the
expansion.
expansion, yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
just in general. So, well, cool. I know we're almost at the end. I think the only other thing, or there's a couple, I guess, quick things just to bring up. So they did do a pass on Mythic Plus tuning. So Halls of Valor actually was the target of a lot of this. They've reduced a bunch of different things, health to a bunch of different things. Um, a bunch of different mobs, including the four kings in Odin's room. So the
Yep.
four mobs you do right before you pull Odin. They reduced God King Skullval's intro, so the RP is a little bit shorter. We talked a little
There's
about that
no
last week.
more. They removed the important part of the RP.
Yeah,
The no, I am God King Scorvold. It's so
yeah,
they removed the important bit, and now he does the like second bit that nobody cares about. And like maybe they had to for technical reasons, but I am disappointed which bit of the RP they chose to keep.
exactly, exactly. So that's upsetting. And they also did reduce. They did do sorry, not reduce, but they did add a duration to Fenrir's Ravenous Leap Bleed effect, which I think is huge in that fight. So typically that was it was infinite, so it could stack. So you got more and more of them. It's now a 30 seconds duration. The leap itself, I think, is a 40-second cooldown. So technically, you should never get more than one stack unless everybody stacks on top of each other and you just cleave, right?
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, so that was sort of I think a big deal in terms of nerfs. But yeah, Halls of Valor was the focus, and they did do a little bit of a pass on Noka and defensive, but for the most part, Halls got the majority of the nerfs.
one of the big things
Um,
here, and like one of the things that is different now from how we played the key in Legion, um, and this was starting to become a thing in Legion as well, but you don't pull wolves. You just don't
uh-huh.
pull wolves. They leap. The leap is incredibly dangerous. You used to be able to like dead zone the leap where they would never do it, and they would
Right.
also never use their ferocious bite. They fixed that. You can't do it anymore. Ferocious bite just like murders tanks, just like absolutely guts it. There's no cast time, and they just die. Um,
Yeah.
they just removed ferocious bite. That is probably like for getting your weekly 15. We're gonna W key and like pull things that are in front of us and
Right.
pull the wolves. Like if you're doing that, this is huge because it means you're not going to have like literally the only tank that was okay with ferocious bite as it was Prot Warrior.
Yeah.
So this is a really nice change for everybody in the world. Brewmaster included. Like Brewmaster, you could get good RNG and you could dodge them. But otherwise, if you pull like three wolves and they all just sink their ferocious bites, even with stagger, you still end up taking so much damage in such a short amount of time. Because even on like a 16, it was like 300k damage each.
Yeah.
So like even with stagger, you're still looking at taking your entire health bar in damage post stagger from the ferocious bites. And since there's no health bar or no cast bar, no timer, like you can't just like push dampen harm in advance. And like I mean you can, and you just hope for the best. But yeah,
Yeah.
like that was probably the like most frustrating part of those. That like in Legion wasn't as big of a deal because tanks were just significantly tankier.
Right. Yeah.
You know, running
Yeah.
around with 90% stagger as Brewmaster, as opposed to the like 60 something percent that you'll have now.
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, so good. I mean, overall, I think some good nerfs in that dungeon. Basically makes pushing, I think, a little bit, definitely makes pushing a little bit easier as you get
Yeah.
up there. Just for the damage output. But other than that, I mean, I know we're sort of at time. The only other, I guess, major things that sort of, or the only really big thing, at least to me, that came out is they've nerfed Cobalt Assembly experience. I literally was set up to level my evoker like Saturday morning. Like I
And they
cleared,
nerfed
like I
it.
had some time. They nerf it late Friday night, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
So yeah, they significantly reduced the amount of experience that the Cobalt Assembly mobs give now. So you can still do it, but like at this point, it's just quicker to either level through the questing or just dungeon, like
Yeah.
chain run
Time
dungeon.
walking
So
is out right now, and time
yeah.
walking the like end of like the dungeon experience is fairly similar to a regular like normal dungeon.
Hmm.
But the end of dungeon is like 50% higher. You know, instead of
Yeah.
60,000 XP, you get 90,000.
Yeah.
So that is faster. That is probably the fastest way to level if you get instant queues outside
Hmm.
of some of the speed quests, like speed routes that people came up with for doing regular quests.
Yeah.
So it depends on how much effort you want to put in. If you want to put in the effort to do one of those like really fast, like 2 hour leveling routes,
Hmm.
then that's the fastest. If you just want to brain off and like W key through a dungeon, time walking
Yeah.
is
I'm
probably
walking
your
for
best
sure.
bet.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's the majority of everything for this week. Was a good week. I think, definitely a good week, at least for me in terms of in terms of raid week. I think you had a solid one too. And then the patch is good. I mean, the super happy with the Mistweaver changes. Like I have
Yeah.
really nothing bad to say other than like fix the bugs. Like
Oh, actually,
fix
there
them.
is a brewmaster bug, an important
Okay.
one. So you know how we were supposed to go from 35% to 45% magic stagger?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they put that on an old stagger spell that is no longer gained.
Oh no. Oh no. So it didn't not working at all.
Yeah, so we
Cool.
still have 35% magic stagger. The talent
Oh,
changes and the celestial brew changes help make up for that significantly, but you're not getting your full magic stagger buff right now. And
yeah.
genuinely, I hope they fix that just because magic damage still feels bad. Um,
Oh no. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
give us a Mystic Vitality talent.
Oh.
Bring back
Oh.
Mystic Vitality.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Okay.
there's some talents we currently don't take that could be ditched in favor of Mystic Vitality. Like we could
Yeah.
do that.
Nice. Nice.
But yeah, I think that is going to be it for the show today. Thank you all for watching and or listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, and you want to support all of our work over on the Peak of Serenity, like Sinzu's recent post about Blackout combo, what makes it good now, how to use it now, what the different effects are, and like their pros and cons. Um,
Mhm.
you can do that by supporting us over on Patreon at patreon.com/Peak of Serenity. And of course, come and join the Discord, which is just the best place to come and hang out in Theorycraft about these new talent builds that we've got going on. But that's going to be it for the show today. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye.